Hello from Sherry, and thank you for joining me this morning. I'm hoping that this video will be of value to you. So what we're going to be discussing is the things that many people don't know about grief. And to start with, just to say that many people don't speak about grief at all or their journey through loss. Because they don't have the courage. It's a painful place to go to. So to start off, I'd like to thank you very much for having the courage to join us this morning. And I ask you to maybe in the comment box below, just to put where you're coming from, where you've joined us from. It'll give me a good idea of what kind of crowd we have gathered together this morning. So the first thing I want to chat about is what gives me any kind of authority to speak about grief. I always like to really know what people know. If it's just an academic knowledge, then maybe they haven't really experienced it. So what qualifies me to speak about the journey through loss is the fact that we lost our younger daughter, Kerry, 16 years ago. So it's been long enough for me to be able to see grief in perspective now. We lost Kerry when she was 9 years old to a non-malignant tumor on her brain, and she died following the operation to remove the tumor, very unexpectedly. So that launched us as a family into years of chaos. So it wasn't pretty and it wasn't easy, which is why I feel that when I can share on a very real basis in a very real way about what grief is. So today we're going to talk about a few of the things that most people don't know about grief. And in following videos, we're going to be speaking about tips to help you cope with your grieving process. We're going to speak about are there only 5 stages of grief or are there more? So this is the first in a series of live videos on grief. And so if you're finding that you're enjoying the content, you're finding them beneficial, please feel free to like them or share them so that they might help other people as well. So the first thing we need to know about grieving is there is no right way and no wrong way. You don't have to follow the stages in a specific order. If there's some that you don't feel, it doesn't mean that you haven't done the process correctly. The only right way to grieve is if you follow your heart and you listen to your intuition, you listen to what your body and your soul really need. So for some people, they need to be really busy. And so, as soon as they can, they go back to work. For other people, it's far more taxing. And they find that actually they can't concentrate when they're working. So they need a little bit of time off. So the first trick is to be aware of and to listen to that intuition, that very wise inner knowing that really does know what's best for us. So together with the comment of there is no right and wrong way to grieve, automatically will follow, and therefore let's not judge. How dare people judge, particularly those who have never been through the grieving process? And sadly, often we are on the receiving end of judgment of these supposedly well-meaning beings, but in fact, their judgments can be very painful to us. So that's the first thing. There's no right way and there's no wrong way. Follow your heart. The next question that lots of people ask is, So how long will it take before I start feeling better? Well, once again, the answer to that is how long is a piece of string? For each person, the length of time it takes to heal is very personal. And lots of other factors will contribute to how long it will take. For example, if it is somebody I don't know very well and maybe didn't have a huge relationship with, then the length of time it will take me to get over their death might be very little time, a few days. But if it's somebody that we really love and have had a long-standing relationship with, be it family or be it friends, it will take longer. And there's no set guidelines as to what is normal and what is normal. The one piece of advice that I did read was that if after 5 years there's certain things that are still happening to you, you maybe haven't cleaned out the room, you maybe haven't started dealing with it, then we have a problem. But one of the videos that I will be doing in future is on dysfunctional grief. So there I will discuss, how do I know if I'm in trouble? What are the symptoms that will indicate that maybe my grief is not just the normal process, but in fact it's heading for dysfunction? So watch out for that one. It'll be coming up in a few weeks. The other thing that lots of people don't know is that initially our bodies are so clever. The minute we experience a loss, a shock, our body is absolutely flooded with chemicals that are sent to protect us. And the way that it exhibits itself is in a numbness. If you speak to people who were involved in a car accident or who are involved with a traumatic loss of their loved ones, very often they can't remember that time. People came to visit us, for example. I can't remember them even coming to our house. So it's important to know that numbness it's God-given. It's a way our bodies are so clever, neurochemically and neurobiologically, that our minds realize this trauma is too big to cope with. So what it does is, through the chemistries in our brain and our bodies, our feelings are numbed and our memories are numbed. Similar, I suppose, to the fact that often women in childbirth, they never remember the pain of the birth. So it's a similar kind of process where, as a way of protecting our body, we are suffused with numbness. And that numbness is really great to start off with. And then over the weeks and the months, it tends to ease off until eventually we aren't experiencing any numbness at all. So my advice would be to actually harness that numbness in the first little while after the loss, and do the things, get re-involved in your community if you can. Go back to school, go back to church, go back to work, go back to the favorite haunts that you might have had enjoyed together with your spouse or child or parent. Otherwise, what happens is, if we don't go back to do our normal things, it becomes like this huge wall that we have to climb over. So while we're numb, we're not feeling any pain. So let's do it. Go back to do the grocery shopping, meet the community, deal with their comments, deal with their love and care. But do it when your body's numb, because we then have almost an artificial strength. And much as it's not good and nice to be numb, why not harness it? So that would be my thinking, is while you are still numb, go for it. Get involved back in society. The other thing that I never knew before our Kerry died was that the grief comes in waves. I just imagined that grief would be this unending, intensely painful place to be. And I'm asking if you imagine the loss of your child, if you imagine the pain that one would feel, I just imagined that it would be constant for the next months, years. But much to my relief, I found out that the grief actually comes in waves. So that pain will build up, build up, build up, build up. It will reach a point where you think, I actually can't cope anymore. And then suddenly it will ease away and you will enter a place of, I can't say total peace and calm because you still are battling, but it will enter a place of relative peace and calm. And it's almost like your body realizes that it can't actually maintain at that peak of pain. You've got to give yourself a break where you can breathe, where you can rest and relax, and then wait for the next onslaught. And that for me was very meaningful, knowing that I wouldn't feel that intense pain 24/7. As time moves on, those waves of pain eventually are not as high, so they're much lower, and also they become much further apart. So once again, our body and our mind and our soul is so clever. There are forces beyond us that are at work to make sure we can handle, or that we are only given the amount of pain we can handle at that time. When it becomes too much, our body shuts us down. And I don't mean that in a negative way. So the pain comes in waves. Eventually they are not as jagged, they are not as sore, they don't pierce you as much, and they become further apart so that you've got more recovery time in between. So for me, that was a big one. So if you have joined me live and you would like to comment on maybe the loss that you have experienced, please feel free to do so. I won't be reading them as I'm giving the video, but I certainly will read them afterwards. So moving along, did you know that grief is actually cumulative, which means that if we don't deal with the grief, no matter how big or how little, the first grief, the first loss, then comes a second loss, then comes a third loss, and then the fourth loss might not be a big one, but suddenly we collapse completely. And it's because the effects of not healing from grief, not healing from loss, become cumulative, and they kind of just wait. They just wait until the next loss happens and the next loss happens. And then finally, it all comes together and we need to be dealing with it. So if you have experienced lesser loss, if I can put it like that, but you have a huge response to it, what is likely to have happened is that there were previous losses that you experienced that you never worked through properly. Okay, so let's talk about working through grief. I'm not going to go into lots of detail in this video, but many people are of the opinion that one can never heal from grief. I don't agree with that at all. There is a saying, time heals. It's actually not only the passage of time that heals. It's what you do with that time. And that's really important. It's what you do with that time in order to facilitate your healing. So are you having some quiet time where you can ponder things? Are you allowing yourself to feel the full, raw pain of the loss? Or are you blocking it? Are you reading the books and getting a little bit more knowledge about the grieving process? Are you talking about the person who's died? Are you thinking about them? In your mind, how are you thinking about the actual death itself, whether it was traumatic or otherwise? And if we can't work with that information, it's very difficult to heal. And then it is our choice whether we stay in that situation of being a victim and forever we'll be known as the widow, the widower, the mother who lost her child, etc. And it's a comfortable place for people to stay initially, and that's why they choose to stay there. But please notice I'm using the word choose. Okay, we can choose to heal, or we can choose to stay as a victim. We can choose to stay stuck in our grief. And I'll be discussing that a little bit more when I discuss whether there are more than 5 stages of grief. So we're going to choose to heal or choose not to heal. It is your choice. No one can force you one way or the other. But I must say, I do believe, I know that people can heal. And in a support group that I ran for many years, when I mentioned that, and these were my words, I feel that as much as one can, I have healed from the loss of Kerry. There were some people who were very angry that I dared to say that. In other words, they were choosing to be locked into the grieving process. They wanted to stay there. Their identity was invested in the fact that they had suffered a loss. Okay, grief also can make us feel like we've gone mad, like we've lost our marbles. And that is a very normal part of grieving. So should that happen, don't get too anxious. There are many stories of putting your car keys into the fridge. There was one story of a woman who, in the height of her mourning process, got into her car to go out somewhere, and she reversed straight back into the garage door. She had forgotten to open it. So she got out of her car, lifted the garage door, and drove out of the garage. And she was thinking, oh my word, I can't believe how stupid I am. And she drove straight into the electronic gate. So that kind of process it's very normal. Our brains are a bit confused. So don't beat yourself up if you are feeling that you've lost your marbles a little bit, that you can't concentrate to read, that you can't concentrate to work. All of those things are very normal, and they're temporary. They won't last for a long time. As soon as those chemicals start easing out of the body, so our brain power or our ability to concentrate and feel normal does return. The other thing is that grief can give you physical symptoms. Many mums who've lost children actually have a pain over their heart because their heart is literally broken. So that's one of the symptoms. But many people get colds and flus, sort of chest-related maladies, because literally we're wanting to get the grief off our chest. And so by all means, take what medication you need to get it off your chest, to get yourself better. And be aware that lots of aches and pains and just not feeling well are a natural part of grieving. Your body's had an enormous shock. And so I like to say that, after a big loss, after a loss that is meaningful for you, to actually treat yourself, your body, your mind, and your soul as if you've just been in ICU and you've come out. So in other words, be very gentle with yourself, what you do, what demands you're placing upon yourself. so that you can start healing. I also want to ask you to, in the comment box, write down any questions that you might have that you would like me to address in future videos. I don't guarantee that I have all the answers, but I'll certainly do my best to get back to you, and that we'll discuss in future videos. So I want to ask you now to maybe in the comment box write down about which fact you found the most interesting of the facts that maybe you didn't know about grieving. I'd like you just to write down which one you didn't know about. And I want you to I would love you, in fact, to join me in future videos on the process of mourning and grieving. And I would like it to be very interactive. So should you want to send me an email about a question you might have or about your story, please feel free to do so. My email address is Sherry, spelled CHERRI, at lifevision, LIFEVISION.co.za. So that's Sherry at lifevision.co.za. If you are local, I would love you to join me on a morning workshop dealing with our journey through loss. It's on the 27th of July, and it'll be run from our home. So if you're interested in that, likewise, please send me an email or a comment to say that you'd be interested in attending. And then also, I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which has not only topics of grief, but any other interesting or many other interesting topics that might just stimulate you in one way or another. And so I'd like to finish by just reading this little quote, which I thought was very appropriate regarding grief. A young boy observed a butterfly straining to emerge from a cocoon. The butterfly appeared to be struggling and in pain. He rushed into the kitchen and brought out a pair of scissors. He carefully snipped the cocoon open, and the butterfly was free. But the butterfly's wings were misshapen. He later learned the struggle and pain the butterfly must endure to emerge from the cocoon were necessary for it to fly. And that is the same with our journey through loss. We need to feel it to heal from it. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you next time.